2022, starting at 7:01 p.m. This is a Zoom meeting being held remotely. We have a quorum, so we will jump right into it. Give me a second, pulling up the agenda here. Apologies. So tonight, again, fairly short agenda, although I do anticipate the conversation being a little bit lengthy on the first item. We're having a finance director budget and capital update, kind of a follow-on from the select board meeting of yesterday, followed by public input, member updates, approval of the minutes from one prior meeting, I believe it was November 22nd, and then adjournment. So with that, we'll jump right over to the finance director update from Alicia and Anthony. I imagine you probably have some contribution there as well. Alicia, you're on mute. I'm not sure if there you go.
Just
Thanks.
unmuted.
All right, perfect.
Evening, Finance Committee.
Good evening.
Tonight, I'm going to show you the budget and capital update I went over last night with Town Administrator Insaldi, who's on with us tonight, with the Select Board. So we went over and we gave an overview on the fiscal year 24 budget, which we're looking at a 1.7 roughly deficit between our revenues and our asks and budget. 8.88% of that is the town operating budget. 7. Yes.
Oh, Alicia, I apologize. I just is there any way you can promote Fred in? I believe he's in the attendees now as well.
Sure. Stop sharing.
And a couple of us were there yesterday at the select boards. We weren't a quorum, but a spirited discussion was had nonetheless. Hilarity ensued.
Yeah. Brian, Jerry, Fred, thank you so much for giving your time last night as well to give us some presents. I appreciate that.
I think it's going to be Monday, Tuesday, every week for a while.
All right, Alicia, back to you.
Okay.
Is Fred here now?
He is, yep.
Just
Fred.
one. Okay.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Yep.
Town operating budgets comprise 8.88% of the increase. 7.39% is the school appropriation. The next slide is our budget highlights on the town side.
Excuse me, Alicia.
Yes.
Sorry for coming in late, but is it okay to ask questions as the slides go by, or?
Absolutely. Feel free to interrupt.
Okay. I was looking at this sheet today, just focusing on sort of the big differences, obviously. And the couple that sort of jumped out at me were the undesignated fund balance coming down by 1.7 million. I was just wondering what drove that?
The capital.
The capital, what does that mean?
So what we're going to do is we're going to program some money to capital. So following the financial policy, it tells me how much I have to leave in reserves, how much I have to program into capital, how much extra I put into OPEB. So we keep that percentage is what you're seeing, the 4.68. And it's based on our financial policy, which is a percentage of the budget, and then how much I have to put into each bucket.
Okay, so last year more went in than the formula drove.
No,
I'm just trying to understand it, that's all.
Yeah.
Okay,
If you don't mind, Fred, if we can meet to go over that, because it's more in
that's
depth.
fine. Okay, and stabilization overlay.
Yes, so for that one, we haven't finished going over all the capital requests. We're still meeting on those, so this is a part of this presentation on what we're going to dedicate from stabilization and capital.
Okay, so there's likely to be something in there. Okay. And local receipts, I assume is something to do with the excise and whatnot, but I just.
Correct. Permits is down, permit revenue is down, our motor vehicle excise is down, so that's why our local receipts went down.
Okay, so, and when you say permits, that's building permits?
Correct, building permits.
Okay. All right.
Where did stimulus money fall in years past, Alicia? Was that on the stabilization overlay other line?
Can you say that again, Tyler?
So yeah, the ARPA money that came in, was that part of that other line? Last
The
fiscal?
ARPA?
No,
Yeah.
ARPA's a grant. It goes in its own separate fund.
right.
Okay.
You wouldn't have seen that part of the budget process last year, Tyler. That's just $3 million that was as a grant.
Got it, okay.
Thank you.
Some town budget highlights that make up that preliminary 8.88% increase is the fire department, 24.43%.
And I'm just going to jump in just for the record here. We had a question about yesterday, which we are going to get to, but just for the record here, we were wondering, whether that increase was going to end up reducing overtime, and that's just a TBD. We're going to find out later.
Yeah.
I did send you a copy of what the select board had, so all those details, Brian, you should have a copy of all of that, of all the submissions, so you can look at that as well.
Okay.
Brian, actually what you will find that there's an additional couple of positions, plus there was an increase to overtime. So to answer your question, no, that doesn't appear to be the case when both are going up.
Yeah, that's just that. I mean, I had the same question, right? I mean, that was the entire, back on our off-cycle ad of heads. That was the entire premise for adding those heads, was to get the overtime number back, and now we're back above the number from fiscal 22, right? So it just doesn't make sense if the rationale for hiring is to reduce overtime.
Right, because we had this whole discussion about there's so much overtime, it's leading to burnout, people can't keep up with it, and we need some staff. Oh, by the way, the staff isn't going to address the overtime. It's like, well, then hire some staff that will address the overtime. So hearing that we're increasing staff and not addressing overtime strikes me as no.
And if we truly need more staff, then, and Anthony and the selectmen are convinced that we truly do, are we going for a safer grant? If you really need them, then it's crazy not to go for safer. Now, it may say you can't hire them quite as quickly, but the money, it's free money, at least for the first couple of years, and then you've got to pay for it, obviously, in the out years.
Sure.
But you have to, in my mind, you really have to be convinced that you need them,
Right.
before you do that. But
Yeah, Fred, I think. Yeah, Fred, I think would be good for us to hear from the chief, right? I assume for the select board and maybe Anthony and Alicia as well. It's just, is there's now a rationale? The reasoning must have changed, right? If the problem we're trying to solve with the heads is different than the problem we were trying to solve with the heads 3 months ago, right? Which was a budget/overtime problem. It just seems like the justification is potentially different now. So that's what I'd like to understand, at least, right?
And sort of a side question to the same line, my sense is we have a bunch of openings right now. Some of them, I believe, I'm sure are critical. I mean, certainly a treasurer you need, and some other department people that you do need to backfill. But going into a deficit like this, it's a heck of a lot easier not to hire somebody than it is to fire them or lay them off later. And I was wondering if there are any discussions to prioritize the headcount openings that we have, and maybe put a couple of them on the shelf until we wrestle this closer to the ground. And you know, if you end up, you know, as luck would have it, you'll surely hire one of the lower people on the criticality scale, and then potentially have to, you know, let somebody go going forward. So I just didn't know whether administration or selectmen or anybody has begun, you know, those thoughts while we're talking about these numbers.
Yeah, Fred, great point. And I think when we're faced with what we're faced with, which I mentioned last night, right? I think you'll remember in all our time and all my time here, and you know, I've gone through 5 different budget cycles. We've never had a deficit quite this large, right? Which is concerning. So with that, you know, I think everything has to be on the table to look at as far as what was approved and whether or not it's recommended to even continue forward with that, even with those positions that were approved, especially if we haven't filled them yet. If that's what it takes to close the gap, I think everything's on the table right now, for our opinion.
If you're going to do that, I would personally recommend that you get together with either the selectmen or your managers and try to prioritize, you know, have a prioritized list in your hip pocket. And, you know, if push comes to shove, at least you've done some of the spade work.
Right.
That's okay. I'm fine with that.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, absolutely, Fred. Great point. We'll certainly do that. And, you know, I think the first go around, we're going to try to just look at what was submitted for this year and not touch those, but it's probably going to have to be looked at. So,
and then OPEB, I assume this employee benefits is OPEB. Is that insurance, or is that just OPEB, or what is that? The 11 million?
Is that the retiree health insurance, Alicia?
Yeah, it's going up $500,000. Is that just a plug number, or we have?
It's probably
so the employee. That's a mixture in the benefits, because the health insurance alone is going up 9%.
Okay.
Plus, we have to account for the new hires that we're bringing on, the new positions that were approved.
Okay.
The building division within land use department is increasing about 14.8% due to wages. They have a new assistant planner that was approved.
That's one of the unfilled positions, right?
Correct.
So again, you know, whether that stands up against another department need, just okay. Enough on that. I'm just. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Alicia, the health budget, I know that's the next one for you. I guess, you know, what we added a health agent to get rid of it and to show the cost, right? So I guess, like, why is that one coming back now that we brought that in?
Tyler, I could tell you that it's an either or, you know, just because, and we discussed this with the director, you know, just because we didn't have the allocation for Neshoba, what we did have is the personnel. So really, you would just take it from the personnel and cover the cost because we hadn't filled that. We're not going to add in Neshoba and add in 85. So that's a decision that's not going to, that's going to be an issue.
Well, except at some point, aren't we going to have to sign a contract with Neshoba? And then we'll have to put that position on freeze?
Jerry, yeah, right now we're a year to year. So because we voted to opt out, it may be part of my recommendation in a couple of weeks to figure out when we balance it that you may hear us say something differently, and I wouldn't be surprised. You know, I think to use Chuck's line last night, pump the brakes. I think that we just may have to pump the brakes on some of this stuff until we get a good hold of the budget.
Right.
So right now they're both in there, Anthony, and it'll be, come the end of the day, it'll be one or the other, the salary or the cost.
Yeah, something's coming out of that, I can tell you. You're not going to put both in because we wouldn't do both.
Okay. Yeah, thanks. That was where I was scratching my head. I appreciate the update. Thank you.
Parks and Recreation, Community Education wages increased 17.96%. This was due to the increase in the administrative part-time person, trying to raise them to a full-time, and expenses increased for 30% on their utilities. We transferred 20,000 from PMBC to facilities. Also, we have in the facilities budget, the new facilities manager position that was approved, one new part-time administrative position to assist the facilities manager, and an increase in the utility costs and usage. We used 10% because I spoke to LELWD, who told me to use at least 10% for the electric rates. I'm not quite sure yet on water, but I just used 10 as a base. Property and liability insurance estimate.
Yeah, Alicia, sorry, just one other thing. I mean, again, if the facilities thing, I mean, the one thing that jumps to mind, right? I think I want to be thoughtful on this and think more, and I think all of us should do the same. Is I feel like we're doing a lot of these things where we're adding one thing that adds to another, right? I mean, the facilities, the facilities director or facilities manager was out there for so long, and now we've finally gotten there and trying to even figure out what that means. All of a sudden, we have additional support for that net new position, right? I mean, it just seems like we have a lot of these things where it's, we need to either figure out how to better plan. There's going to be ancillary things to support these new functions we're adding, or whatever. It just feels like there are all these 1-2 punches, when we're not really thinking through or necessarily thinking through.
It was never really a surprise to us, Tyler, that we'd be looking at adding something to support, because we certainly don't want to pay a facilities director to sit there and process payments, right? That's what we're not looking for. That we're looking for his or her expertise on a whole nother level. So, and to support the administrative, that's when we knew at some point it would, to at least a start, to be a part-time. But I wouldn't be surprised if it morphs into a full-time down the road, especially as we, continue our growth.
Right, and at some point, and we wouldn't expect this right away, but at some point we will see presumably the benefits of having a facilities, director, because we have certainly over the past had not to name any building in particular, but we've had buildings. It's like, wow, how did that get? So it's a thing where we spend some money now to save some money later, but we don't see it until later.
Yeah, but I think the benefits are going to be potentially a more predictable 10-year plan, things like that, right? I mean, I think this is, and hopefully forestalling some of the larger things, right? I think that's where we can hopefully avoid some of the $4 million surprises or whatever it is, and really understand what maintenance looks like, and make sure we're better building that into everything, right, and getting ahead of it.
Yep.
I think you'll see better planning.
Question on that is,
Yes, Jerry?
this new facilities manager and administrator, they're going to need a budget for their own expenses though, right? Is that included in there, or?
Yep, Administrator Insaldi, that's why he had us transfer the 20,000 from PMBC to give them something to start off with.
Okay.
And just to tie the two slides together, on the previous slide, park and rec, electricity was going up 30%, and you're saying in general, town electricity should go up 10%. Is that because they have extra space, or is that?
No, it's the water. It's the water, Fred. That the driver of that one, that larger increase is what water. We paid a lot of money to keep Corpor and the Common green until the point when we shut them off when people didn't like the fact that we were trying to keep the fields in good condition. So it cost a crazy amount of money. Matter of fact, you'll see when we were working on the capital today, Steve Yonley, one of the things that I requested of him is let's look at drilling wells, right? Because we don't need to have treated water to keep grass green. So he had it in schedule for next year budget. I actually brought that forward because we should do that, because I think the rate of return, it might be 7 years before it pays for itself, but we have to start somewhere. And I think that would be money well spent by the town to put a well in for Corpor and the Common to start anyways. And then even with the high school field being redone, part of the sewer, same thing. You know, we don't want to spend that kind of money. The numbers are outrageous that we pay for water.
Okay, okay. But,
It's not the rate, it's just the amount of water that.
sure,
we-
the gallons that you throw on the field, sure. Okay, good. All right, thank you.
Property and liability insurance estimated increase of 20% based on the new senior center building and additional equipment or vehicles that we'll be bringing online.
Does that change if we, and if we do the Indian Hill thing? Who knows? Who knows?
It depends, it's dependent, yeah, it depends, and then it depends on timing.
It probably would cover it. I think we're a little conservative in that number, Brian, because we don't, you know, we're always going to be conservative in numbers that we really still haven't nailed down yet.
Absolutely, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, so I think that we would be fine with
Okay.
covering Indian Hill with that.
We estimated the technical school assessment increase of 10.14%. As I stated earlier, health benefits at 9% based on the national average, which I confirmed with my representative as a good conservative estimate. We'll get the real amount in the spring. The treasurer budget increase is primarily due to a transfer of a position from HR down to treasury for
So
a payroll.
so does the HR budget go down?
It does slightly. They are going to be replacing a HR generalist position there instead at a lower amount.
So in effect, we're adding hours somewhere.
Right.
Okay. All
Because
right.
she had 19 hours already last year, but now she wants to bring that 19 hour to a full-time, make it a generalist position.
And a benefit eligible. So it's not just the hours.
Correct.
It's benefits as well. Okay.
Town clerk elections budget has an unfunded state mandate that we have to cover, and that's a 67% increase to their budget and an increase in postage by 1,000 or 33%.
And some of that was covered with reserve fund transfer or transfers this year, right?
Correct.
Yeah,
We covered part of that from, you can go ahead, Town Administrator Solly.
Oh, go ahead. We just gonna say, we addressed that during special town meeting where we moved some money out of the police budget into the town clerk's budget.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, to address this year.
Okay.
Then we have some software costs being transferred from communications to the specific departments. The reason we did that was for transparency, to show the true cost of operating each department instead of having it just in this one big communications line.
That's awesome. Way to go.
Well, but a couple of these is increased. Let's see. Land use. I don't know what that means, but increased 23,000 for open guy permit software. So that's an increased software package, or that's just truly shifting from
Truly shifting.
IT to
Truly shifting. So that CAMA software is only used by the assessors, so it's going into the assessor's budget. Land use department only uses the OpenGov for their building permits. So for all their permit software, they're getting that. Police for their electronic systems, fire for their systems, DPW, and 3,500 for mapping for the cemetery.
So this isn't part of the increase because it's sitting in the IT department.
Correct. It's a shift.
Shifting to the other department.
Correct.
Okay. Okay.
But if somebody's looking at the budget, all of a sudden they're gonna see this percentage increase under the assessor's office that they haven't seen. So it's kind of just bringing to your attention that.
Right. No, that's fair, but understanding that it's a shift and not an increase.
Not really a contributing factor. Yeah, you're right, Fred.
I can absolutely see 15 minutes disappearing in town meeting explaining this.
No, but I guess I do have, Alicia, though. I mean, looking at IT, like I see, the software and system contract. I wasn't finding the line that had the decrease that matched it.
The communications, it looks like it's level funded, but that's because she has other initiatives. I believe she's launching new websites. She's doing some other things. So you might not see a decrease because she's launching some other new initiatives.
So
Yeah, we
the-
had some increased costs. We have, the new Civic Ready. We have the new website. We're doing some upgrades. We're doing two-factor authentication to avoid somebody trying to steal our funds. So, keeping up with our infrastructure to keep it nice and secure.
Okay. Yeah. No, thanks for, yeah, that makes sense to me. Obviously, working in IT, there's a lot of cost for security and all the rest of it. I saw the decrease at like 10.5, but I just wasn't seeing something to match this, so I was trying to understand it.
Excellent. Now we're going to take a look at the school budget and their highlights. They increased by 7.4% or 1.7 million over last year. They have 1.262151 that they want to bring forward, and 441,000 in addition, which is the 161,000 for new staffing. So you see that administrative cost, special ed staff, additional sped, administrative support, teaching staff, total new staffing request 161 right here. And $280,000 for additional buses for changing start times. That's down here. Additional buses for moving a two-tiered bus route for changing school start times to 280,000. They have increased utilities just like us, 100,000. They have.
Excuse me, do we have a sense as to what kind of an increase that is?
For their utilities?
Well, yeah, for the utilities.
Percent.
I mean, is it 10%? Is it 20%? 30%?
I will look at that. I think it's a little higher than 10%, Fred, to be honest, but I'll rather sit down and give you the actual amount.
Okay.
Yeah.
Their school
Yeah,
bus.
natural gas is a lot higher. There's a big shift there too.
Yeah. Alicia, I may have some notes on that too from their budget sub meeting I went to. I just don't have them in front of me, so I can look for that after this.
Thank you, Ted.
Fred.
The school bus contract is up, so they're gonna put that out for request for bid. They're guesstimating about 113,473 increase. Their operations for their copiers, security systems, 10,000. They have substitutes, 30,000, out of district tuition, another 180,000, and case collaborative of 25,000. And their salary, COLA steps and lanes at 803,678 up here. So the town administrator and I are going to meet with the large departments and try to bring forward a balanced budget recommendation for fiscal year 2024.
Right. And when would you expect to have that at this point?
We're shooting for the 19th at the select board's meeting. And like I said last night, before we started, the goal was to give a recommended balanced budget, but 1.7, that's going to be tough. We're going to attempt to get to a balanced budget, but it's going to be a challenge.
Yeah. Okay. And on the school budget, it looks like their salary increase is about 4%. So that's steps and COLA and all that.
Yeah, steps and lanes.
Okay. All right.
So now we're going on to the proposed fiscal year 24 capital budget. We have 9.5 million in asks. 1.7 million in capital funding. 41,950 in paid cable funding. So as you can see, we're short 7.8 million. Here are the particular projects that go by department with their requested funding sources. So we have the cemetery asking for a truck replacement, historic gravestone preservation from a grant, an administrative building needs assessment, DPW, a zero-turn mower, Ford Explorer or SUV, facility feasibility study, infield groomer, fire prevention officer vehicle, an ambulance replacement. LCTV wants fiber upgrades and some archival.
Excuse me,
Yep.
on the ambulance,
Yes,
Um, will it be totally funded from their revolving fund?
No, they don't have enough in it, Fred, right now. And,
Yeah.
you know, the reason why I would think that this is something that's probably need to survive the budget process, the capital project, because it takes 2 years to order an ambulance. So I think what our goal would be is to recommend approving this project, but as a borrowing article. And similar to what we did with the last ambulance, you know, because it's going to take 2 years before we even see it, it allowed us the time to build up the reserves in their
So it should be able to pay for itself by
it
time.
should. In
Well-
terms of that year 2 or year 3, we may have to just supplement it with some capital, but the goal would be not to borrow for that and pay cash.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
just to understand, so the ambulance revolving fund is, I don't want to exactly use the word profit center, but it's a generally a net positive where we can accumulate funds.
Well,
It's a net positive. I would say originally when it started out, it was thought to be cost neutral and maybe build up potentially. But you know, we had a good decent first year, and then we had a couple of years of COVID, and that really hit us. So we transfer out. It used to be $600,000 into the general fund every year, but that was reduced to, is it 500 or 525 or?
525.
Yeah, so that was reduced to 525. So we're not fully getting the full subsidy that we thought we were originally getting, which is fine, right? Because we do have to replace some ambulance. So
Sure.
no, Brian. Yeah.
well, yeah, and Anthony, I know this came up in kind of the meetings prior to the special as well, right? And one of the reasons that the chief or interim chief, I forget at this point, had mentioned it, running behind, it's just there was a fairly large uncollected balance, right? Just a lot of receivables on things that hadn't been brought in. So I mean, I think
Right.
if that's, you know, if the select board's philosophy is, you know, kind of, okay, if the residents are struggling, et cetera, we don't really want to chase that and go to collections or whatever that would be. You know, we just want to make sure we're building a financial model that is realistic, right? So I think we should probably take and revisit that as we're doing this and build a
We at
model,
least
right?
understand what's going on. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Can I ask one more question too? These numbers are all included in the request, excuse me. So like the gravestone preservation where it's saying that they want it to be paid by a grant. If that remains in and they don't get the grant, does that mean it's we're agreeing to fund it without a grant?
No,
No, yeah, no. We're not even sure what grant they were referencing, Jerry. Honestly, when we go through the capital plan and we did today, you know, looking at that fine grant, or we would recommend that could be a CPC project too. But
if they indicate a funding source, that's the only funding source they can use based on their.
You know, we asked them to indicate a funding source to kind of give them their thoughts, but honestly, it's not some of our stronger attributes of our managers to know really our financial picture and how we really, you know, how the sausage is made per se, right? So
Right. So if
that's
it's included in the capital plan and they can't get the grant, they are authorized to spend money to do it themselves, I guess is what I'm asking. No.
it has to have a funding source attached to it. So
Okay.
grant, they have to wait until they get the grant to pay for it, or they could use CPC, or they could use their perpetual care.
Okay.
2 out of the 3, well, actually 1 out of the 3, I think needs town meeting approval. I don't think the perpetual care needs town meeting approval. I think that the cemetery commissioners can approve that. Right, Alicia? Am I
you are
correct?
correct. Yep.
Okay. Thank you.
Planning would like a zoning bylaw diagnostic and recodification as part of the master plan. Police would like a camera and security system. Cruiser replacement plan of 2 cruisers. Tasers for $10,409 a year if they lease them versus $52,045 if they bought them. Parks and Rec wants sailboats, a community center with a pool for $2.9 million. Long Lake dock replacement, new field creation at $200,000, a replacement of a Ford Ranger pickup truck, and resurfacing of basketball course at 300 King Street. Their total requests are at $3.359 million.
Yeah, I'm not even, I won't talk about the pool, but I'm just wondering, where is this new field where is that going to go?
Good question, Brian. When we know, we'll let you know.
Because 200,000 sounds like what you might need once you had purchased a several acre flat space with parking and access and all that. And I bet that 200,000, gets a $500,000 helper.
Or infrastructure or whatever, right? I mean, definitely be good to understand that. Anthony, you had mentioned the irrigation or the wells for the fields. Is that something that's going to pop into the cap plan too? Like that
Yeah.
cost that?
Yeah,
Okay.
don't be surprised that something's gonna fall off and that's gonna make its way, because that, those are what you want initiatives, right? Those are what ones you
Yeah.
want to fund where it's gonna save us on the operating budget. To me,
Yeah, sustainable
those are
over
the things
time.
that take priority if we realize that we're gonna recognize the savings.
Where would that land? Would that land in Park and Rec or DPW?
DPW,
DPW.
I'd probably put it under DPW, yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Steve's done it in Chelmsford a number of times. We've talked about this, so he'd be perfect to run the project and get those in.
Okay, so this slide is showing the total town projects were 4,561,544, and schools are 4,991 for a grand total of 9,552,544. So you can see for the schools, they want concrete sidewalk repair, some furniture replacement, floor replacement, field lighting, HVAC unit, high school roof for $4 million, high school floor, tennis course reconfiguration, 200,000, library folding wall replacement, 25,000, and a swing set replacement at Shaker Lane and Russell Street for 30,000. So we broke out below our funding with our sources, capital of 1.7, the paid cable funding that was requested for LCTV at 32,000, and the grant at 9950, leaving a deficit of 7.8 million. So it's going to require a lot of detailed analysis and vetting for what we're going to do with capital. Any other questions?
Yeah, I no specific questions, Alicia. I guess, we even for these larger capital items, right, after the senior center, we don't have a lot of room under the levy right now to borrow, right? So I think the larger stuff is going to be challenged for quite some time. But yeah, especially as the 10-year projection you sent out, right, or whatever that was, fairly recently. I mean, I think it's not a one-time problem we're trying to solve here.
Right.
Yeah.
And most people, what they do is if we don't fund some of their bigger projects, they push them forward and they request them again in the future. So it's not like they disappear. Sometimes they come back.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just, kind of that mentality, we hear at a town meeting a lot is it's not going to cost us anything. It's not under it's not an override, it's under the levy limit, right? But now that we're squeezed up against it, I mean, we're kind of seeing the impacts of that for some time now, or we'll be seeing that for some time now.
Right. A couple of things. I think at our town meeting, at the springtime meeting, we really need to do an educational piece. And I know we've done this in the past, but a piece along the lines of free cash isn't free, under the levy isn't free, nothing's free, because people will say, as you said, oh, it's all good. With regard to the capital, I mean, I think, so we've got to find 7 million. Well, the high school roof, that's has a whole process, as Anthony has said. So that's, take out 4 right there. For me, I would whack everything under Park and Rec. I see all of those as, ponies, nice to have. And, you got 7 million right there. I mean, I know it's not quite that simple, but honestly, I didn't see anything in Park and Rec that I wouldn't whack.
You're not too off. You're not too far off, Brian. I agree. That's why I said last night, I'm not really, of all our problems, this was the least. Capital was the least. I think that that one, you're going to see some completely different recommendation on the 19th on that.
One other thing, and it's relatively small in the grand scheme of things. But if you recall, there was $250,000 of the purchase price for the Montanari property that went to CPC through the Light and Water Commissioners. And there was a big hoo-ha around tennis courts at that time. And I know for a fact that Alumni Field is near and dear to several of their hearts. So at least one of those projects, I would think, could be funded with those funds. So I would think approaching the Light and Water Commissioners, at least to fund one of those, would make sense. I mean, the money was put in there for a reason, and
Fred, it was like you were in my conference room today when we were talking, what you just said. So,
okay,
we're on the same. We're thinking the same.
okay, that's fine. I just wanted to make sure it was up there on the table. That's all.
Absolutely.
Okay. Sorry about that.
No, no need to apologize. I think you're making the town administrator smile. So is Brian. So
Right. Well, the thing is capital. I mean, Anthony, to your point, I had to say, I smiled last night when you said, or somebody, I think it was you said, can't fund ongoing with one-time fund sources. And it's like, Fred and Steve, oh my God, that was 10 years ago. We were beating that drum. And the capital, that's one time. It's the structural operating budget that's.
Oh, that was a late first, the buses, huh?
Okay, now I'm going to fight for the buses because I will say, the premise of school is education, and later start time. I'll push for later start time. However, the buses happen. Later start time is the best thing we can do for the kids.
But Brian, keep in mind when you do that, right? It's really not our job. It's not mine and Alicia's or the select boards or even the Fincom to tell them how they spend their money. It's a matter of how much we're able to let you spend, and how you do it. That's up to the school committee to work with the superintendent and prioritize what they think. So, just as a, we never want to get into the specifics of how they use their money. It's just how much.
Absolutely. Oh, totally agree. Totally agree. I think the school system has promised later start time, so they're going to have to deliver regardless of the money, and we can only give them what we can give them.
Right.
Anyone else have any initial questions for Alicia and Anthony on the presentation?
I was just wondering, each of the departments, I'm assuming, typically run the same as far as like the percent of the operating budget that goes to them. It might change a little bit from year to year, like with COVID or certain extenuating circumstances. But assuming that's true, do we ever go back to them and say, how would you adjust your numbers to fit into that percent of the budget that you normally are, and see what they would cut?
So
Does that make sense?
But yeah, what I usually do is I clear out everything so they can't even see what they had the year before. So that way they're not just relying on, okay, I get this every year, so I can just plug that in. So they have to be more thoughtful and really justify what they need. The increases we have seen are the employee positions. That's really what's been driving up the costs.
But if you say, based on our revenue, we expect this much, this is your piece of the pie, how would you spend that?
Right.
We
Jerry,
don't do it that way. We have to justify what they need.
Okay.
Jerry, what you can do, and I've had to do with this in another community, when we have a deficit that we really can't figure out, right? And we need everybody to do their part. What I've done in the past is kind of just what you said, do a percentage. What's your percentage of the budget? So just I'll make up numbers, right? Say if the school is 60% and town's 40, well, the school you got to make up. And if we need to cut, I don't know, $200,000, you need to find 60% of that. And on the towns, you need to find 40% of that. And based on your percentage of the budget, police might be responsible for 10%, and this one might be responsible for 3%. And, so that could be a tool that we use if we say, you know, we got to have slashes, you know, we have got to cuts. And even if you do mid-year cuts, that's one of the ways that you do it and say everybody has to take a piece of this hit.
Thank you.
Hey, George. Hey, Brian, just one sec. George, I see your hand. We'll be at public input that's next on the agenda, so we'll be there very shortly. So just be patient with us for another couple minutes.
Yeah, the across the board reductions or whatever, you know, we've done that in the past. It's awful, but we have done it in the past. I think one of the selectmen last night mentioned our one of our, you know, going into our stabilization funds or something. And I think we all kind of freaked in that, you know, for the record, stabilization fund is for emergencies. You know, that's really a last resort. It's like, you know, a snowstorm makes the roof of some building collapse. That's what stabilization is for. It's not for, hey, we hired more people than we can afford.
And that's
Right.
and that's where I mentioned that's one-time revenues that we don't use to do to handle that. You're right. And the time that you really want to do that is not when you're adding positions. It's like just to create a level of services of what we do. Then, you know, and if the one weird year, then perhaps it's not really still recommended. I don't like the idea, but you're right, Brian. You know, it's tipping. We're not even in my opinion, we're not in a situation where we should even consider our reserves to offset budget growth.
Right. I mean, if we're doing that, we could easily just look at the next few years and forecast it right down to zero. Right. I mean, you know, it's not the ideal path for sure. Any other questions on this for now? I guess I had kind of one processing or timing thing, right? I mean, I think for us as a board, you know, our next discussions on this, you know, I think we were scheduled for next Tuesday. I got a little off on the cycle in my head, right? You know, we're posted as of right now. We're scheduled right now for the 13th and the 27th, with the budget books not being ready until potentially the 19th. I'm not sure that meeting next week makes sense. You know, but I wanted to kind of throw that out to the group, you know, and does everyone feel we should get back on the regular cycle and skip next Tuesday, get back to meeting on the 27th once, you know, we have that budget book and potentially attend the select board meeting? I want to get back to the regular schedule. I didn't realize we had kind of flipped to an off week based on changing a couple of the meetings.
Are the selectmen doing anything budgety next week?
No, just the 19th, Brian. So it might make sense to do the 19th, 20th.
Yeah.
You'll have a lot more. And then even that 27th just in my opinion, you may want to stay away from that. That's when staff tend to take a little bit of break. Yeah.
Okay.
But
Let's shift it to the 19th and 20th.
Okay.
And then see where we are on the 20th. And if we need to do something after that, then we can figure that out. Does that feel okay to people?
Yeah, that's fine. I'll work on confirming a quorum for then just to make sure we're good. But at least the worst case, we can participate again on the 19th or show up as members of the public.
Okay.
All right. I guess if no one else has any further questions, let's move to public input. It looks like we have two in the audience. George has Sanders has his hand raised. If Alicia, you could unmute George. Hey, George.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
You can.
George, we got you.
Okay, this is George A. Sanders, 672 Great Road. I want to thank you for giving me the opportunity to comment here. My first comment is regard to Park and Recs. First and foremost, I don't find that anything that Park and Recs is asking for capital improvement should even be considered first and foremost there, for the simple reason they have been a partial enterprise and function as though they were the enterprise, and they come back in, they get called in, and says you can no longer be an enterprise in a department, so you're going to have to come home and be a department. I think that the town is missing a great value here by not staffing or calling a manpower survey in to survey what the parks department is supposed to be doing. How many people do they really need? We don't even know that. And to go to another point that I asked at the town meeting was, what representation of the budget is the number of people that work for the town of Littleton? I can't get that number because I hear all the time that they're hiring somebody, part-time position here or whatever case. The town doesn't even know how many people they have on the payroll. This is a disgrace to this town and to the taxpayers. Now, to go one step further, when we talk about the school, you know, I've always been hard on the school committee because they like to hide money. And what I mean by that is that they get money from the state, they get money from the federal government, and then they come over and ask the town to give X dollars. One thing I find that this town cannot do is discriminate against any employee or department as far as I am concerned. And the reason I'm saying that is because I understood that town wanted to offer 2% on the COLA, and the school department wants to offer their employees 3% on the COLA plus their step increases or whatever the case may be. You have one element in this town that's the head of the town of Littleton, and that is the select board. The select board is going to have to approve this budget, and it should be based on the professional advice that I consider of the professionals that we have on Fincom. I give Fincom a superb A because you are the one that does the forecasting and looking down the road to see if the town is going to be able to function as a balanced budget that gets approved by the DOR. That is very critical because you don't want to end up at the end of the year with a negative. My concern is that all employees in the town of Littleton should be getting the 2% cost of living allowance. I don't care about the school department. They want the 3%. If they want to give them 3%, let them go into their reserve and pull the other 1%. There's no reason. This money belongs to the taxpayers. And we taxpayers need to speak up a lot more about what the departments are doing and not doing and representing being good keepers of the people's treasure. And I don't quite find it when the school department wants to go against the grain and do something other, and we got people in the town. If you're working here or there or whatever, why not you get the same 2%? Why do they have to get 3%? They're no more important than any other employee in this town. And this is where the select board and this Fincom board, you have to stand up and be strong in denying what is not good for the town. And the town cannot afford to go out on this loop. If they want to tap their reserve money that they got and give it to the people, fine and dandy. But I don't think you should give our taxpayer money to them more than what no other taxpayer, no other employee or department is receiving for the cost of living allowance. That is something that we need to stand up and do what's right in this town. And if you give any employee more than you give another, then you're discriminating. That is not good in this town to do stuff like that. And I know about budget. At the federal government, it's multi-million dollars. This is nothing for this budget that the town had. I dealt with budget with the government for over $350 million. And we had a minute department, and I worked with all branches of the service, to include USOM and the United States Embassy. This is no reason. This is no way for us to work this town and have these things. I see so much stuff that is slanted in this town when it comes to different employees in this town. And that's not
George,
right.
George, I mean, one thing I would suggest, right? I mean, as a board, clearly, we're responsible for presenting a balanced budget. I think a lot of the budgetary drivers, especially around salary, are coming from a lot of different contract negotiations, right? So I think probably the single biggest thing that can be done to influence that philosophy with the school committee is just making sure that they're hearing the voice of the public as well, right? I mean, we don't have a whole lot of purview or ability to control, neither the select board, the specifics of contract negotiations agreements with that board. But I think the message, I think, we'd all kind of land on the side of equity across the town, right? But I think it's more complicated than that. So definitely would encourage you to speak up in that board as well, just so everyone's hearing that message.
Right. And I'd say, George, I mean, I loved your comments last night. In general, really agree. I mean, part of the thing with the school school costs is just steps and lanes, and that's part of contract negotiation. And that's,
I understand that. I was a contracting officer for the federal government for 15 years. I understand contract, but cost of living is not a contract. And it shouldn't be more than what you're giving to the other employees of the town of Lilton. If the town of Lilton came in, I'm in the process of sending a letter to the select board because they're the head of this government with info going to Fincom and anybody else that needs to hear, including the school committee. It doesn't matter with me. I'm going to say what I want to say because the fact is that we cannot mistreat people, and more people needs to speak up and understand how the tax dollars work. A lot of people don't understand because they put people in place thinking that they're going to protect and do the best for the people. And that is not always the case. And I'm not slanting that towards saying that you're not doing what you're doing. I'm saying that there are things that we need to hold the feet to the fire. When there's
I think we're fortunate that, we have a very collaborative tone with the schools, and we're really hopeful that, we're going to work together to close the gap, right? I mean, while the select board has a lot of, direct influence over things on the town side, I mean, they don't really have the ability to tell the schools that, their number's too big, right? I mean, it's just the school committee are elected officials that I mean, one of their only real charges by statute is their ability to set their budget.
I understand that they have this budget and they come in and basically say whatever they want. But when it comes to the town having to give them money, now we're talking about the taxpayers now supplying the money. And I'm a taxpayer that's saying, listen, if they want to give a 3% cost of living allowance, let them take the 1% out of their reserve. We should not give them the 1%. That's what I'm saying.
Understand?
right. It's just interesting because in past years, I mean, this is going way back, but in past years, the school department did heavily dip into the reserves, and we questioned that because that's not sustainable. So I absolutely take your point, George. And to the degree we can, I think we are going to hold everybody's feet to the fire.
Well, I think that it behoves us to let the citizen in this town, as taxpayers, know that we're getting good representation and doing. And it's always come to the fact that people say, well, we per se don't have authority to tell the school committee this or that or whatever case is. All that money belongs to taxpayers. Every bit of it
Yeah.
belongs to taxpayers. And the fact is that we have a right to speak up and say when we see things are not going the way they should, and when someone else is getting paid more money, especially when the cost of living is based on the federal index here that comes once a year, and they said this is what the goal is, and then the towns the municipalities in the state, they want to say, well, we'll give this. I mean, you don't have the luxury to give. You're trying to be fair in what that you're doing. And I'll drive this home with this cost of living, because I think anytime you give one person more money in the cost of living than you do another that's working for the same government, we got a problem.
Yep. All right, George, thank you. Thank you very much. And again, your participation is always great. I encourage you to participate with all the boards as we move through the budget process. We have one other member of the public that has their hand up. Alicia, if you could unmute Solomon, that'd be great.
Good evening. Excuse me. Thank you for allowing me to participate. I feel like I'm Solomon Marini, member of the Park and Rec Commission, and felt like Park and Rec was getting a little beat up on here. So just wanted to chime in a little bit. And I'm sure that there'll be more follow up in the actual meetings, but the requests that were there, I don't think reflect or certainly not in the order of priorities that we discussed when we discussed it at our last meeting. And I'll say that the two things maybe that the center and pool, that's nobody expects that to happen in the short term. The other ones maybe that there is a replacement of a truck that's 12 years old. I think we've gotten good use out of that. And then on the other sort of potential side of expansion, the sailboat fleet is really a way to grow a program that is very successful and could use some additional resources to continue to grow and support the kids that have started in that program but are starting to age out of the facilities that we have.
Okay. Yeah, and so I think keeping those large items on our radar is critical, right? I think that came up for the first time last year with the community center, and I think it's super helpful in helping us plan and really come up with a realistic 10-year plan, right? Because there's obviously a lot out there, so it's good stuff. Do you know offhand one of the other questions we had was around the new athletic field? Do you know offhand what that was for, or where that was?
No, I don't. I think we have certainly the need for an additional athletic field. We didn't actually. I don't think we discussed more of a planning design piece than an actual build, because as everybody's noted, the property availability is really limited. There is some chance that you could get a useful field at Cooper, but it's not ideal. And it would still require all the infrastructure that we talked about with the tennis program. So, I don't think there is an immediate clear path to a field that I'm aware of, but.
Okay. No, that's helpful. It feels like with Indian Hill, there's just so much in flux right now. That makes sense that there wouldn't be a concrete thought on it. I appreciate it.
Yep.
Any other questions for Solomon while he's on here?
Thank you for calling in.
Yeah. Appreciate the participation. This is great. It's what we need, right? We need everyone to lean in and so we all understand. So I'm very much thankful for that. All right.
Have a good night.
Yeah, you too. Moving on to member updates. Jerry, anything for the group tonight?
No, I think we've covered everything.
Okay. Brian?
No, I think we've covered it.
All right, Fred?
Nope, all set.
All right, and I'm all set as well. Alicia, could you bring Marilyn in? We'll approve the minutes from, I believe, November 22nd. Did she email that to all of us? Hey, Marilyn.
Hi, Tyler. How are you?
Doing well. How about yourself?
I'm doing well.
Thanks as always for keeping us on track here.
You're welcome.
Did anyone have any questions for or other minutes or discussion on the minutes on the 22nd? Okay. If not, can I have a motion to approve?
I'll move that we accept the minutes as presented for our, was it November 22nd?
November 22nd. Yep.
Yep, okay.
Second,
Great. Roll call vote. All in favor, Jerry?
Yes.
Brian?
yes.
Fred?
Yes.
Alvin?
Yes.
All right. I'm a yes as well. Motion carries unanimously. With that, can I get a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Great. Roll call vote. Fred?
Yes.
Brian?
Yes.
Jerry?
Yes.
I'm a yes as well. Thank you, everybody, for hanging out with us on a Tuesday. Anthony and Alicia, thank you for doing this 2 nights in a row. And I guess we'll talk with everyone on the 19th and 20th.
Sounds good. Thank you,
Thank you
everyone.
all.
All right.
Good night.
Good luck and reach out if there are any issues. Take care.
There's
Bye-bye.
Bye.